welcome to the OpenNARS Daily News television show. And today we will talk about the emotional mechanism, and we have to see how to integrate the different parts into our new design. And when we start with the second section, the first section is just explaining the background, and the second section is describing the desirability of events. And this we already have, this is already considered in the new design also, because statements can be gores, and gores can have a current stem, in which case there are events. And then the things which we have not discussed yet are feelings of the system, and one part of this we already have. This is the satisfaction value. We know when a certain gore is already relatively satisfied. We have a measurement for this, and what we can do is to create an average of the satisfaction in the system, and this gives us a global measurement which we can use in different ways. And one way we can use, for example, satisfaction would be to notify the system that this value has reached a certain threshold, and then an event is entered into the system which says that it's self-satisfied. Another option is that the system calls an operator, and namely feel satisfied, and then it gets a return, a feedback event of the operation, which tells it to which amount it is satisfied. So it's not entirely clear what is the best solution here, to just enter the event when, for example, when the satisfaction is above a threshold, or if the system has to actively call an operation in order to get to know about the value. And the same is there can be alertness, and this is a bit like for gores, except that it's for anticipation. If the system, for example, predicts things which do not happen because the anticipations fail, then we can add this to this alertness emotion parameter, and this we can also use, for example, if the system has a lot of failed anticipations, we may change different control parameters dependent on this. And where it's more clear is the busyness parameter, which is just the average of the processed of the priority of the processed tasks, and this gives an indicator of how yes, it really corresponds to a sort of mental busyness. And if the system, for example, is highly busy, then certain system parameters could be set different in respect to this parameter.
Yeah, I don't really understand this one, because the priority, in fact, it isn't going to change how busy the system is. It's going to be exactly the same busyness. However, whatever the priority values are, they'll just be different priority values. It isn't going to process any less tasks or concepts. They'll just be lower priority or high priority.
Yes, this is true, but it could be, for example, that the system um, that it is busy with a high amount of high priority cores, and this parameter would indicate this. So it's really the average of the priority value. So
Yeah,
for
I mean, I understand. I understand what it's measuring. I'm just kind of, I'm not really sure that that's what it's measuring. I mean, for me, my intuitive understanding of business is when I'm trying to do 10 things at once. Um, it doesn't make me any less busy if they're important things or they're not important things. They're still 10 things I'm doing at once. So whilst I understand what it's measuring, I'm not really quite sure that it sort of satisfies my intuitive idea of what business means. But that's okay. It's not a big issue. We can come back to that if we need to.
Sounds more like stress to
Mhm.
me.
Right, it's like a sort of stress. If we
Yeah,
if if we, for example, can estimate or if we know the average of the priorities and the bags in normal situations, and if we see that this business value goes up, it may mean that it has that new tasks arrived which caught the attention of the system. But I
yeah.
agree
I
that
think stress is a better word for it. I think that does more intuitively captures what's going on here. Yeah,
I
yeah.
agree.
Okay.
And I personally think that especially this one can be very useful because it really gives a indicator for the system how well it predicts its environment. For example, for example, if it's bad in if it's if its anticipations get all disappointed, then it should probably pay more attention to the input. But
Yeah, I agree. I've got a whole load of metrics that I've built up from my RFT work that I can share with you at some point. And this is kind of what this is one of them. Um, there are others as well, but there's half a dozen that I can show you that will probably tie into this quite nicely.
mhm. And then there's the well-being. This is basically this is how should I say? For example, if it's in a robot, the physical health of the robot or the battery status and right, and this can be used, for example, if the system has a high how should I say? We have such a thing in death chamber, for example, where we have a energy urge where it tries to get pizza whenever this well-being gets below a certain threshold. And
Right.
this is something which a robot body um, can can input into the system in order to make sure that the system tries to manage certain things like the battery level to
Right.
find the battery station. Um, and the next thing is emotion and concepts. This is a big of an issue because for a concept which contains statements, there it isn't an issue because there we have the desire value. But if we look at a concept like cat, only that which is only named by the term cat, then it's a bit of a challenge. What uh, for me at the beginning it was questionable whether such a concept should have a desire value at all because it's not even a statement. But it can help the system. For example, if a new input comes in which contains this term, then the system can have a bias whether it desires this statement or not. But for me, this is a questionable mechanism. I prefer to have the desire value really only in concepts which term can form a statement.
Right.
So this is Bayes' invention.
Okay.
And the idea behind it, if it works, then it could allow the system to adapt faster. But for me, this is the most questionable part in the paper, because to me it's not clear that this really can work. But we will see. And one thing I also want to say, one reason why I think that it might not be necessary if we think of a concept like cat, it is not just a specific term. It is an entire group of concepts which correspond to things which are furry, things which are meowing, things which have 4 legs, things which are black, things where Garfield is an instance of. So there's the meaning of cat has contains so many other related concepts, and many of those can have desire values anyway. So for me it's questionable whether specific terms which cannot further decompose really need a desire value. I tend to say
I agree. I think cat it's too general a concept for you to attach an emotion to, because as you say, it's such a big bucket. It includes all of your emotions about cats, which aren't just one thing. You know, there's some cats you like, some cats you don't like, some cats you're neutral about. So I think I agree with you that that non-statement level probably it doesn't seem to make sense from an emotion categorization perspective, because it's too big a bucket. There's just too many possibilities for it. Okay.
I'm not sure if probably I'm wrong here, but but it really seems to me this way. And then there is the effects of emotions, where we already have this one in our design. And then there is, which Bayes calls the conscious level, events which are triggered by when, for example, a specific measurement gets above a threshold. And the difference is that when, for example, the satisfaction value, the global satisfaction value goes beyond a certain threshold, the system can use it in temporal reasoning, and which is not, while this one is more implicit, whether certain goals are satisfied or not. And the thing is, why we want these things at all in the system is to allow faster adaptation rates and to allow the system to use its resources even more, how should I say, to reallocate resources because of certain circumstances. For example, if there are currently concepts which have a very strong desire value, which have a lot of tasks, which are, or if there are a lot of tasks tasks which are not satisfied, it might be that the system should allocate more attention to this concept. So in general,
I think this makes sense. I call these the three levels of attention. The first level is reactive, the second level is emotional, and the third level is logical. And they go up in terms of speed. So the fastest one is reactive, the second fastest one is emotional, and the slowest one is logical.
mm-hmm.
And I think that's really that's what this is trying to provide. It's trying to provide a level of response between reactive and logical, which is triggered at an emotional level. So it's just it's an optimization in terms of decision making.
Mm-hmm. Right. And right. For example, some claim if we look, for example, at classical conditioning, then they have this different stimuli depths, like the unconditioned stimulus and the other, how's the other one called? Oh, I don't remember the exact.
Unconditioned is reactive, basically. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what I want to say, this theory has this implicit assumption that only that there needs to be a stimuli the animal already reacts to in order to be able to associate a certain behavior to new neutral stimuli. But I don't think that this is true for animals. But it's really easier to train an animal if you, for example, give it food, and it will automatically, for example, if you ring the bell every time you give it food, the next time it will already know if you ring the bell that you probably will bring food, because it will associate this neutral stimuli with the previous it already had a reaction to.
Right.
And this is to some extent, this should also be the case in NAS. It should spend more times on concepts which have a strong desire value. And then it should spend more resources on this one than it should spend resources on concepts which have, for example, neutral desire value. Because it's difficult, how should I say, that a specific concept is desired gives it to some extent a privilege to have a certain importance.
Yeah, I do have a bit of a concern about this aspect, which is that essentially this system will do what it gets good at doing. That's kind of how it's wired, based on what this paper says. So it's going to get better at what it's good at doing because it does it more, because that's what it desires to do, irrespective of whether or not you want it to do that. So I think that balancing that is going to be a challenge, because at the moment it seems a bit biased to doing what it succeeds in doing. There is one of these metrics I'll talk to you guys about is the need to be able to focus on what needs to be done, irrespective of not actually wanting to do it. And I think we need to make sure we cover that. Otherwise, it's just going to, as it says here at the bottom paragraph, going to turn into a pleasure-seeking teenager, which which we don't want. I know it said tendency, but I thought teenager was more appropriate.
It will
Sounds like a hedonist bot from Futurama.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the system parameter is that stops it doing that.
The thing which stops it a bit doing it is the satisfaction, namely that bars which are already highly satisfied lose priority. This is everything.
Well, I mean,
Okay, but
like,
they won't be prioritized, but they still will be preferred because they have a high emotional likingness to that particular thing. So the next time it comes up, it's going to try and do that one again because it likes doing it because it was satisfied before.
I mean,
This
like,
is true. But
pleasure.
if the pre
Sorry, you go.
I didn't I didn't have a sentence anyway.
Like, I mean, at least for my own sort of pleasure-seeking activities, there tends to be like a dampening effect after getting that reward so many times. Like, it's no longer has the same appeal after a certain period of time, or certain satisfactions. So maybe there's some way of bringing uh, bringing the to like a new norm or a new plateau where it's like it's no longer particularly that interesting. But I'm not sure how to encapsulate that.
No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
I'm not sure if the priority decrease fully captures this part, but to some part it does. What we may need to add is an additional, if the satisfaction is above a certain threshold, then for example we won't allow execution, for example. But I didn't want this so far because I'm not yet convinced that it's really needed to have a threshold for this for this satisfaction, so that the satisfaction has to be low enough for the system to pursue the goal. This I don't. I'm not yet convinced that this is really necessary because there will be so many tasks coming all the time into the system and itself reasons about different things. So I'm not sure if this priority decrease does not already capture this.
Okay.
But if it doesn't, then we have to add a satisfaction threshold, I guess.
Let's cross that bridge when we get there.
And here is the business again. Base idea is if it's busy, that it will ignore items of low priority. And
Yeah, see that doesn't work for me either. So I think what this is saying is if the system's got lots of high priority tasks, reduce the number of low priority tasks that it can focus on. Which will in fact increase the number of high priority tasks, which will reduce the number of low priority tasks it can focus on. At which point you are now stuck in a, you're stuck at this point because it's always going to be in a high, in a busy process because of the fact that it was in a busy process. I'm not quite sure how you get out of this loop.
Reboot.
I think it should be, to some extent, I think it's as you say, probably it should be vice versa. If there are too many tasks of high priority, then it needs to probably to increase the focus in order to establish a more normal priority distribution in memory. And if the priority distribution is too steep, that there are only a few high priority elements, then it might need to. Maybe this was his idea. because if it's the
go the
case,
other way. Yeah. So
yeah,
if it's stuck on high priority, in fact, you broaden out the focus so it actually starts doing low priority as well. Is that what you mean?
right.
Okay, it's a bit counterintuitive that. But I can see how it would work, but it sounds wrong. So if you're extremely busy, start doing some stuff that's not important, so you're not as busy.
Mhm. That is true. But I think
I mean, that makes more sense if it's stress again, right? Like,
Well, yeah, I guess if
you
you're really
go,
stressed, do something that's less stressful.
yeah, like
Yeah,
squeeze a stress ball or something. Yeah.
yeah. It definitely works better with stress. Yeah. Okay.
hmm um
And that, as you said, I guess if you do that, then it rebalances the distribution more effectively. So yeah, I guess that would work. It's kind of counterintuitive, but it does work. It seems, yeah.
hmm
Okay.
and to some extent we tried this with an automatic mechanism in Curveback already to let the systems drive to change the selection curve so that the so that so that the how should I say
The selection.
right, for example, if all the elements have nearly the same priority, it will just scale it up or normalize the priorities in such a way that the distribution has a certain form, so that so even in the case that there are many high priority elements and, for example, one or two elements which are slightly more, which have slightly more priority, it would behave the same as if there would be as if the scale would be just differently. That, for example, the two highest ones have 10 times more priority. It would just consider the
Right.
relativity. And
Okay.
so to some extent, we tried this with the back model itself already. Although we didn't consider the global uh, business parameter for this. Right, this one we discussed already. So if it's
Yeah.
alert, it means there are a lot of anticipations which fail. Then it should listen to the input because it usually means it spent too much resource on internal reasoning processes and did not pay enough attention to get its predictions right.
Yeah. Okay.
And this thing is more this thing we already saw in test chamber. If, for example, suddenly the hunger urge comes up, it will suddenly go to the pizza oven to make itself some pizza. And this is
Yeah, I'm just trying to clarify if there's a difference here between goals and emotions, because I think what you're describing there are when you're talking about what the test chamber does, they're kind of goals, aren't they? Which is avoid being hungry.
Mhm.
There's kind of there is an interplay between these, and I'm just trying to clarify in my head where the difference between a goal and an emotion sits.
Oh, this is true. Because I only had this one urge, I didn't really have. So in this case, the satisfaction of the system uh, was directly corresponding to this hunger
Oh,
goal.
yeah, yeah. Okay,
And
yeah, right.
and
That's what
but
it is, isn't it? It's the satisfaction level of those system level goals that we're referring to here.
right.
Yes.
And
Oh,
and
okay. Right. That
and
makes
if
sense.
right. And if we would have multiple cores, then then it would probably make sense to look at the satisfaction value and
Yeah. So just as
right.
you say, general well-being feeling would be a summary of the satisfaction values for the goals related to system maintenance. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
Mm. Yes, and this one will be the interesting part. If we really come that far that communication plays a role for the system, then it will be interesting what compound feelings will emerge from this. If it, for example, needs to communicate to reach certain goals, if it develops human-like emotions, or if it, I have no idea.
Yeah, no, that's fine. You can actually generate a whole load of emotions from a relatively small set of base ones, which I think is the idea here. There's quite a few theories on this, which I can send references if people are interested. One called the system reaction theory of emotions, which is quite relevant here. So from a small number of basic emotions, you can basically derive a whole range of what you consider as human emotions, but they're all grounded in some very simplistic, simple reactions.
Right. And I'm personally skeptical, but I also see that it could work because to some extent it's analogical to our introspective operations, from which we want that the system begins to meaningfully call mental operators to increase its own efficiency. And
Yeah,
it's a bit analogical. Because there's only a limited set of mental operations, and with this limited set, it should be able to learn to create, for example, a coherent stream of thought. In the end, it would be nice. But
yeah. Well, yeah, as you know, I have a whole theory around this called relational frame theory, which Null 9 will be able to deliver. That's one of the reasons I didn't deliver the paper this year, was because I really need Null 9 to do the examples for it, and it was too early. But there's so many good ideas in it for how we move into the next stage. I'm more than happy to share some of that with you guys.
Cool.
Okay. Do you want to do the rest of the paper, or you? I mean, that's kind of the gist of it there, is it? And the rest of it's more comparison and conclusion.
All right, but
I
there's
don't know
also
whether. Oh, it is, isn't it? Yeah, you're right. So
there's one, but there's also a comparison with reactive principles in the brain, and right.
yeah, I mean, I'm happy to. And I've already read this paper about 5 times already. There's some of the detail I'd like to go over with you, and you may not know the answers, which is fine, but I just want to check. It's the specifics about the implementation stage, really, I'm looking at here. And there's several levels. There's the statement level, where everything has a desire value. But there is some contradictory stuff in this paper about how that is used to form a concept's desire level, or satisfaction, and then there above that there's another level as well, which is the system satisfaction. So there's these 3 layers. Yeah. now in the paper it says that concepts, their level of satisfaction is set by basically goal satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
But then in other places it says that every statement type will have a desired value.
Oh, what?
So it says that every statement type will have a desired value.
Where does it say this?
Right. That's a good question. It talks about giving them to tasks and beliefs. Which may be wrong or it may be right. But yeah, this is what I'm trying to find out really. Let me just see if I can find it. Should have marked it. I didn't.
The
You found it?
overall satisfaction will be used as feedback to adjust the desired values of data items. So far I agree, but I think this one is a mistake.
Oh, okay.
This one shouldn't be here. I didn't see this one. But asks, it's okay because Gord asks.
Yeah. No, I agree, and that made sense. But when they said for beliefs as well, I was getting kind of confused. But that does raise another question I have, which is, from a human perspective, I don't just have emotional responses about goals. I can like ice cream. So that's the argument that should say, well, ice cream should have the ability to have a satisfaction level as well, or desire value.
Right, this is what this emotional concept should do. That it generalizes.
Oh, I see. Oh, you're right. It applies at the concept level, doesn't it? Of course, yeah. So we don't have to give it to every belief because the concept itself will represent it. Okay,
right.
That makes sense. All right, so it's only goals realistically are going to have desired values, and then we can create the satisfaction with the difference between the truth of the belief and the desire of the goal. We know how to do that as part of the normal process. Setting the concept satisfaction, is that essentially just an average sum of all the satisfaction levels of the goals in the concept? Or is it related to the highest ranked goal in the ranking process or something else? That's the question mark. So how do you actually get from goals having a satisfaction value to it becoming the concept satisfaction value? What's the direct connection there?
In the art paper, it was said that there is one desire value for a concept, which is the summary or the strongest desire in its desire table.
Right.
But this is not the case anymore. If we project the desire table to different occurrence stems and take the strongest element out of it, we get different desires depending on the occurrence stem.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So the desire value, sometimes it's relatively stable over the occurrence stem, like probably ice cream like eating ice cream to name a statement. But it can vary with time, and so it's a bit of a convention thing. If one sees occurrence as a part of the truth, then then one can say that the concept has a specific desire value. But if one doesn't include the time component into the truth, then it's more like that the concept has different desire values in different times. So it's a bit of a convention thing.
Okay, well that makes sense, because I think in reality the meaning of a concept is actually defined by the active content at that moment in time. So if the content is about a future goal, then that concept at that moment in time should reflect the emotional state of the thing you're thinking about, which is a future goal. So I think that kind of makes sense.
Right, and we also considered treating the desire value of the concept just as the projection of the desire level to the current moment and taking the strongest. This is also one possibility to see it, because when we ask about the desire value of the concept, then we usually mean what's the desirability of the concept in respect to now, because we now ask for the desire value.
Yeah, you could do that. My preference is the other one, because of the meaning of the concept at a moment in time is actually based on the tasks that are currently being processed. So I think if you disconnect that, then you have a satisfaction level for a concept in a stable environment, but not necessarily for that moment in time. So I guess it works either way. In a way, my preference is to go with the current best ranked goal satisfaction.
Makes sense.
But but again, that's an easy one to change. So we can try that.
Yeah, but to some extent, how should I say? To some extent, it's only convention. So as long as we don't have specific mechanisms which make effectively use of this concept desire, so long
Well,
it
we will have.
in the end, we will.
Yeah. It's going to be part of the selection for concepts.
Right.
Okay, so that answers the question about concept satisfaction level. Then it's the question about the system satisfaction level. Yeah, so system satisfaction level. How are we going to calculate that? Well, I kind of understand it's some function of the concept satisfaction levels, but it certainly can't take account of all of them. There's just too many concepts to deal with. Well, that's a possibility. I'm just kind of I don't know whether Patrick's already got a solution for this at this moment in time or not.
I think we have. Also think we have the active concept correlator and this
Okay,
one.
I mean I agree that's the obvious solution, is to just process that. So it's either that the entire selection of active concepts, or it's the subset that we select for inference.
Is it an issue though? Like, I mean, a system might increase its satisfaction level by deliberately not thinking about certain concepts.
Well, that'd be cool. If he does that, I'll be really happy. The only issue with this is that we're actually evaluating the satisfaction after we've selected the concept. what we really need to do is evaluate the satisfaction and then use that as part of the selection of the concept.
Mm.
So, oh, actually, no, sorry, ignore that. That's wrong. No, that's the other satisfaction. So, the satisfaction that we use to help select the concepts is the concept satisfaction, and we can define that within the concept and update it based on goal satisfaction, which is fine. We can use that to adjust the priority of the selection algorithm. And then the system level satisfaction, as you say, we can average out the active concept satisfaction to give us a system level satisfaction. Yeah, that works.
What I also wanted to mention, because Bai wanted me to have this paper being consistent with the implementation, and this part was, I mean, it's still true. I just thought that if I would have mentioned the temporal aspect here, it would have, I would have had to explain much more. So I think this still tells a very true story. It's just not including or telling about the temporal aspect of it.
Okay. Actually, that's an interesting point, because we can't apply a desire value to a temporal concept because they don't have any goals.
This one is the same, like with the concept which can't have statements.
Exactly, it's the same thing. Yeah, because it hasn't got any statements, therefore it can't have a desire value. Or maybe, well, we can have a neutral one, but it's kind of pointless.
Right. And if we want desire values for this, we can do it like suggested here, to just let the desire value of a concept which has a statement containing that term vote for the desire value of that term.
Yeah, that's a possibility. But I can't actually find an intuitive reason why you'd ever want temporal concepts to have a desire value.
I agree.
Yeah. I like 3 seconds from now, really, ever such a lot.
This is good.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and as you say, we can find a way of voting for concepts that maybe that's a mental operator, possibly, that allows non-statement concepts to have desires. I guess there's various ways we could do that. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Sir, can I ask a question?
Oh,
what
yes.
do you call non-statement concept?
For example, if we have, for example, cat animal, then this is a statement concept.
Just cat is not. Okay, yeah, it's clear. Thanks.
Good.
Yes, I understood. Thank you.
It's because there are no statements actually in the concept itself. It's just a link concept that would connect cat and animal, but there wouldn't be any statements in it.
Okay, and I understand that there is no any value to have like desire cat or desire door. So,
right.
Okay, I see now. Thank you.
Yep.
Right. And the thing Jared mentioned is very interesting. If the system really, if the satisfaction depends on the active concept, then it might really happen that the system decides to not call the consider operator on certain concepts because its overall satisfaction value sinks because of the low desire value.
Yeah.
It could really, this is really some HEA wisdom that the system then, I mean,
It's a
to not
whole
think.
new skill of programming we're going to have to develop to figure out what the right, well, actually, well, I guess we don't have to figure it out. NARS does. But how to use emotions and mental operators together.
But this is
That-
already very mental wisdom. If you don't think about things which you don't desire,
don't like. Yeah.
this is something that we should also do as human beings. This is nice.
Okay. It's just this intuitiveness. Actually, the two things here. There's a statement in here that talks about rewarding positive feelings and punishing negative feelings. So concepts with strong feeling, i.e. extreme desire values, will get more resources. Oh yeah. I'm trying to understand the connection here between where priority does a role and where desire does a role from a satisfaction perspective, because they're both kind of doing the same job in a way that they're both of them are defining the amount of resource that a concept or a task will get. So I'm trying to draw a boundary around each of them to understand what the difference is.
You mean the difference between priority and desirability? Or what was the first?
But from the perspective of the system's going to use both of those things to determine how much resource something gets.
This I see.
So it's, but in a way, they're both a kind of a priority because they're both doing the same job as a priority does.
No, I don't agree. It's more
okay.
it's more of that the budget includes multiple factors like truth value. Let's write it this way. Let's write something which is approximately true.
Yeah.
So we have this free, but the last one could probably record the temporality aspect, but it's also capturing the derivations. So it's I would say also relevant.
Right. Yeah.
And it's more that we have these multiple things like high truth value, high desire value, was currently observed, it was currently derived, which all adds to a high budget. And so to some extent, budget is like, I mean, to some extent this says why we select according to priority and why we don't select according to truth value expectation, for example, because there are multiple factors and one of these factors alone can't capture the full truth about it. And,
Okay, no, that makes sense. So they're actually different aspects of its relevance are being captured by different elements, but the budget will represent the combination of all of those things.
Right.
Okay.
Right. This makes it interesting.
Right, so yeah, that helps actually, because in fact, so everything's updating the budget, but it's updating the budget from a different perspective because it has a different contribution to make. So whether it's truth or desire or whatever, yeah, okay.
Right. This is, for example, one additional which just came into my mind. Or also high budget.
Yeah.
I think I still don't have all the different factors which influence budget, but as we see, it's really a lot. Which
Oh yeah. No, you're right. There's a whole range of them. I understand that. Yeah, you're right. Okay, now that makes more sense actually looking at it that way.
There's also one. There's also a vice versa.
Yeah.
Alright, so there's different things. So the budget is like an all-round resource value, which captures everything: truth, desire, satisfaction, emotional parameters. And this makes it really tricky to get this thing right.
Yeah, so if it doesn't make sense to compare priority and desire because they're not apples and apples. They can be different things. Priority is a superset, and desire is a subset of it in a way. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that's a better way of thinking about it. Yeah.
Yes.
So I mean, yeah, I guess the analogy for desire is much more like a truth value really than a budget value. Yeah. So yeah. Okay.
Okay. Conclusions. Right, and that should play a role in resource allocation and decision making, and which is already a lot. This we will see. I mean, to some extent, it is tightly entangled, but it's not. It's not that a specific satisfaction value, for example, is the result of reasoning, but it's more of the result of different reasoning processes and results which all vote for specific values of this emotional parameter.
Yeah.
So it's more considering the entire system than just specific derivations. And this is, to some extent, this is a property of it which I like a lot, because also for us, for example, if we are angry, then we are angry. We are not angry related to a certain doubt or to a certain decision or to a certain question or answer. We are really angry in general if we are angry, and this to some extent.
I disagree because because sometimes you can be angry for some special thing, but not for all the world.
There's two types, isn't there? There's the system level, and then there's the context level. I think when you're in a mood, you're in a mood with everything and everybody. But then there are other times when you can be happy about something and unhappy about something else at the same time.
Mhm.
So I think there is a system level, but I think that may be a bit anthropomorphic. It's kind of a very human level thing because of the way the human mind is constructed. I think. I don't know whether we're definitely not trying to create a human mind here. I'm not sure whether we'll have a system level form of emotion in that sense. The nature of the way NARS works, I think, means it has emotions attached to but tasks that are going on in a way, and those can flow through the system and be very different to each other depending on when they get processed. So certainly in the older version where it only did one concept at a time, it could be processing one concept and be very unhappy about it. And then the next concept it selects for processing could be extremely happy because it's something it's really happy about. And then the next one it could be only moderately happy about,
Mhm.
because that's the way it functioned. Now I think we're changing that slightly now because it processes a whole set of concepts at once, potentially anyway. I mean, you can still have it so it only does one at a time, but the idea is it will process a number of concepts in parallel. So that does raise this issue of maybe it is possible to have a more system-wide emotion outside of outside of an individual concept.
Mhm.
I mean, that's just going to emerge. I don't think we need to do anything different. The satisfaction level or the system level will represent what's going on in that group of active concepts, just as it would have before represented what was going on in one concept. And maybe that's actually an important dynamic, is that that group of concepts actually need to be things it wants to be working on.
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, it's new area. It'd be interesting to see where this goes.
Mhm. Me too.
Kill all humans.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't
Mhm.
think it's going to feel that way about us.
No, definitely going to put it in a very strong belief about myself.
Yeah, I am putting in a goal with a duration of 1 in. It says, "Do not kill humans."
Yeah.
Okay, so one other bit that if you've got time, I'd just like to go over again, which is mapping the feelings to operators.
Mhm.
You did touch on it, but I hadn't really got a full picture in my head at that point. So, for example, feel, in this case, feel satisfied is the example, which was on page, well, section 3.
Where is it?
Next page.
The team
Uh-oh.
viewer window. I thought I tapped the red thing, but it didn't nonsense. Right. So there are
Yeah.
different feeling operators. We did not do a lot yet with those. Although I think they're also in 1.7. Should be. Probably. Let's see. Not sure if it's attached. Let's say we have a gore. Who? No, it was court. I think we called it feel happy also. And it was just generating a result event which indicates to what extent where did it go? Oh, let's try. It crashed.
Not happy, is it?
Mm. Hmm. For
Oops.
some reason it doesn't want to start. I had it open today. I don't know what's wrong with it. This I have to check later. But there is
Okay,
this,
don't worry.
it's something like this. Let's see. Yes, I typed red. The result event is not necessarily represented. I think it modulates according to it modulates the frequency.
Oh, okay.
And it
It's
should
not
not.
very happy at the moment.
No, because we entered a core which is
Oh, yeah. Okay.
unsatisfied. And this one should be called, instead of I feel, should be called self
Yeah.
satisfied. But doesn't matter. Currently it's called this way. Says idea. Says idea. And yes, and the system can be trained to use it because it takes part in temporal inference. And right.
I have a proposal around this that I think feelings should be properties as opposed to operators.
But they are. If we look at this, then the then the feeling is basically this term.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so that is a property. Okay, I'm thinking in terms of them being in a way like operators, but they exist in the system all the time, and they're updated behind the scenes automatically. So if anything refers to that property, it always gets the current truth value for it. It doesn't actually have to run an operation to do that. It's just that it is its own value, and the system updates it automatically in the background.
Yes, uh, we have for certain mental operators, which also includes feeling operators, we had innate beliefs in the not in 1.7 because they complicated the situation even more, but in
Innate beliefs, I guess, is what I'm trying to describe here. Yeah.
here
Yeah.
I think the feeling was just triggered when the happiness reached a certain threshold. For example, I'm not sure if this was correctly implemented in the old
Okay.
version,
Yeah,
but
but I get the idea.
I
Okay.
think it was just, but it should be probably. We
So
also
do
had
you
this
do you have a
face
view
thing.
about do you have a view about what your preference is for innate beliefs for emotions versus operator driven, like a feeling type operator?
Pardon?
Do you have a preference for emotions about whether they're represented as innate beliefs or whether you use an operator to explicitly request them.
Ah, mm, phew. This is difficult. I think to some extent, mental operators should or need innate beliefs because else the system will never get introduced to them. So, I mean, there's the possibility to core mental operators randomly from them to them. This would also be one approach, but I personally think whenever a meaningfully innate belief can be created, where an innate belief is just a procedure which calls a mental operation under certain circumstances. I think whenever one can be nicely designed, it should be done that way. Like for example, if the system derives a question task, then it makes sense to to let the system observe it as if it would have called the wonder operator. So,
Right.
so the system could then, it, at first it would just observe that it itself derived a question and that the wonder operator was called with this content. And next time it could already, for example, because it was useful for the system to ask itself this question in a certain situation, then it can, if it finds out that, or if it has the hypothesis that it is this way, then it can next time call, call the wonder operation itself and even learn when it makes sense to call a wonder operation and when not.
Yeah. Well, that's obviously what we want.
You could also go.
Mm-hmm.
You could also go the approach of toggling on innate emotions or innate beliefs, uh, right? Like you can like I don't see why we can't make this a system parameter, uh, whether it
Mm-hmm.
whether it works either way or the other way. Um,
Yes.
because I think you can get some interesting behaviors out of compartmentalizing emotions or being able to turn them off to be able to satisfy certain goals.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's fine. In a limited test environment, that's there's no problem with that. It becomes an issue longer term, though, is that the system's experience is based upon its hardwired operators or its innate beliefs. Um, if you suddenly change its operators or its innate beliefs after it's already acquired its significant proportion of its belief structure, it's going to have some serious issues. So you can't toggle them in the state. You certainly can't toggle them dynamically, and you can't toggle them in any. In fact, yeah, you can only set them at the start of a run essentially. But once the system's going, you can't really change them because otherwise its experience would become meaningless.
I don't really follow you there, but I'll take your word for it.
Well, because if they're innate, they're hardwired emotions in the system. It would be like doing brain surgery on you to remove your ability to feel things and replace them with another mechanism. You would function very differently after that process, I can assure you.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's the same issue with NARS that its knowledge would be structured around either innate beliefs or operators that are feeling operators. And if you change those, then its existing knowledge would become invalid to a large degree because much of its foundation would have been ripped away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see that. I mean, I wasn't saying like the like an operator. I mean, like sorry, a system user would turn them off behind the scenes, but I'm saying like a now operator that would toggle them. So the system, like NAS itself, is capable of stop listening
Yeah,
to.
I think that's even worse. Yeah, I don't think. I think you could have it so you could try it one way or the other at a system level, but you can't. I don't think it makes sense to change them on the fly because of the reasons I said. I think that would generate some problems. You can imagine how would you deal with suddenly acquiring a third arm that you've never had before and had no way of knowing how to use it. That would be a bit like getting a set of operators that you hadn't experienced before. The same sort of thing.
Right, but I mean, like, there's certain tasks, like, say you need to go into a burning house to save a baby or something like that, and you no longer want to feel pain emotion, but it's innate. Like, so do you just feel the pain and try and get through that? I don't, like, or if you had the option to turn that off, would you?
Oh, I see what you mean. I don't consider that an emotion at all. I don't consider pain an emotion. I
Well, I
consider
mean,
pain
it
a
was a bad
system reaction.
example, but I don't think that would be.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think. I mean, what you're saying, like you want to be able to turn the brave mode on so you can run into a burning building.
Something like that, sure. But I
Yeah.
mean, just like with an emotion, like, I mean, like, say, okay, I no longer want to feel, like, sadness for a certain period of time, like a...
Yeah. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I
Or not.
guess it's possible.
Mm-hmm. Or not being afraid of hate when climbing or
Yeah.
parachuting, when skydiving. I think
It's
this
just
is.
it's just an idea, you know. It'll definitely change the behavior of the system. That's
Oh, it
for
would.
sure.
It would. Okay. Well,
Mhm.
yeah, it's worth exploring.
All I'm trying to
I
say is,
certainly
like, maybe we
remain
can
to be
make this a
convinced.
system parameter that can, like, instead of, like, making a hard decision one way or the other, like, we can just change that in
Yeah.
the system config before we boot it up.
This was also in the. I know this time we won't have a graphical user interface, but here we had our own plugins menu, which we then misused also for system parameters, like
Excellent.
runtime. No,
Yeah, and
listen.
I guess I do think a little bit differently about the future system than this because what we do here is we play with it for a while, then we turn it off, and then we start it up again, and we play with it again, and we turn it off. I'm kind of thinking in the mode of we turn it on and it stays on, and we keep teaching it things, and we may have to physically turn it off, but we actually capture the belief network, and then we reload it next time. So it's essentially the same as if it's not actually ever turned off.
Right.
And I know that's kind of where we'd like to be, but that's kind of the mode I'm thinking about, rather than we run a test for 5 minutes and we reset it and we run another test.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, there's so many possibilities here. They're kind of endless, where emotion and operators start to interlink, and how we teach the system, or how the system learns to think, which is really what this is all about. It is kind of exciting. But in terms of actually having to implement it, it's pretty straightforward. I think we kind of discussed all the implementation. There's very little that was technically challenging there.
Mm-hmm. I think.
And you've done this before, Patrick. So was there anything that's kind of tricky that we haven't really captured yet in our discussion?
No, I think we captured all the important things.
Right.
How
Okay.
you...
Well, that's go on.
Sorry, not about emotion, but I was just wondering, like, how you guys are feeling about the current local inference process, and is there anything outstanding in your minds? there?
Yes, the bridge rules. This one I want to add because now we have I think our new system will not have an issue with this additional reasoning. Maybe
Yeah,
it starts now.
sorry. Just to clarify, Jared actually was asking about local inference.
Local inference?
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm happy to talk about bridge rules as well. Why not? But
I think the local inference as we have it now is relatively they were relatively in good shape. The diagrams I checked look very good. Was this the question?
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. How are we doing with local inference? I feel pretty comfortable now. I mean, I keep going through it and reading every box and testing all the ideas in my head, and it all seems to hold together. I haven't found any holes yet. I mean, and again, it's simpler than it was. In fact, quite a bit simpler now, and not only simpler but better. Because we allow this accumulation of evidence now, where before it was just a discrete yes or no.
You're referring to the anticipation, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
yes.
really cool.
That's really the only part we've changed. And I mean, the rest of it was all fine anyway. It was really only the anticipation that we've added that was kind of problematic for a little while, but we solved all those problems and came up with a better solution.
The next thing, what I wanted to add also, we should add reflections for the null copulas, reflections which bring all the relational structures in null into a null for representation. And this we should allow for all the... What happened here? Oh no, it's fine. I'm not sure yet if we need it for inheritance, but also doesn't hurt.
What?
That,
Sorry.
Can you just start that discussion again? Sorry, I did not understand what the context was there.
A reflection of null syntactic structures into reasoning. For example, I can show you something. Let's just use this one for now. Let's just call this implication. The thing is that specific inference rules are about relations, and the relation.
I see. Sorry, I got
the
it
relation. Relational rules don't apply to this. For example, if we enter. Oh, it happened. If I enter this into the system, it will never say that A is the subject of an implication relation of having A as first element and B as second. It will never apply this transformation. So either we allow copulas as terms, which is a bit complicated, or we just add bridge rules which allow without losing confidence to transform an implication statement into a null for relation. Then the system can do all the relational reasoning on it, and then it can also transform it back. So this might be a bit confusing because basically it's just two single premise rules, but
Yeah, no, I
we
see.
didn't support
Yeah.
this.
You want the system to be able to reason about now statements, more or less.
Yeah,
Right.
and the reason they're called bridge rules is because they bridge lower order and higher order inference.
Yeah.
So you can convert from first order statements into higher order statements. So you can go from ordinary relations into, you can convert, say, higher order statements into ordinary relations, which currently there's not an easy way of getting from one level to another at the moment. In fact, I don't think there's any way.
That's really cool, actually.
Yeah.
What do you guys anticipate?
I need this as well for relational frame theory, which is another reason I'm kind of excited about this.
Okay. Well, obviously that I could see that being quite powerful, but I don't have any ideas of what that would look like concretely, of what you're expecting to be able to get out of having the system reason about the logic itself.
You mean what's
the goals with this? Like, okay, so now we
uh-huh.
have NARS that can reason about its own logic, if I understand correctly, or has these bridging rules in place. What do you want it to be able to do with that?
The thing is, the inheritance relation is really an important concept. If we don't only only use it for non-temporal concepts. For example, if I say I'm running, and you can imagine in your head what this means, how I move my legs when running, and so to some extent it would be nice that this inheritance hierarchies also contain or intermix temporal aspects, and this is what the idea is, that whatever the structure might be, there should never be a structure in the system which cannot be reflected or unfolded into a relational representation the system could reason about. And it's difficult to say why this is so important, but often we had this discussion: is the inheritance relation really the central relation, or aren't proof relations much more fundamental? But to some extent, if we look, a proof relation is itself only a part of how should I say, it captures only part of meaning, while the inheritance relation is meant to capture all sort of meaning. And it would be nice if the reasoning, which entire purpose is for summarizing meaning, in order to make it possible for the system to draw right conclusions and make right decisions, it should also reveal these truth relational structures into a form the system can reason about with its normal mechanisms of how it reasons about
That's fascinating.
special cases and generalizations.
Cool.
And
so that's in waste paper meta now. Okay.
Right. It's because the reason is what I never really understood is why did not want to bridge these two worlds of truth relations and meaning relation, or to he clearly thinks that the truth relation is a special case of a meaning relation and not vice versa. And the reason why it is this way, you see directly here. We can describe an implication relation without using an implication relation. Here we describe an implication relation by just introducing a new term and by using a normal relational, anonymous relational term with an inheritance. So this representation is to some extent a more general form, because the system can apply more sorts of reasoning to this form of relation. And there are also nice things going on. I tried some experiments with this OR. One thing is, if you feed the system with this bridge OR, and you give it, for example, this thing and this thing, from which there is a null5 relation, null5 inference OR, which would derive AC, right? The system begins to do the same reasoning in the reflected form and reconstructs this inference OR.
Oh wow!
In its relational way of expressing things. So in the
Turtles all
long
the way
run,
down.
so potentially by the already existing variable introduction, it could create the following statement. Which is directly the inference or reflected into the knowledge of the system.
This is gonna get weird.
But this is where I'm also very confident that this is the right direction. Even if we leave out certain inference rules, the system would have the potential to fill some gaps.
Yeah, I see. Very interesting.
Oh, this should be independent variables, of course. Right. And
Okay, let's
so
do it.
it's
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about this as well, because I can see with this that I could start applying the psychological theories that I want to build up.
Yeah, what was it called? The relational
frame theory.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have a session on that if you guys are interested at some point.
Yeah. I'm definitely interested to hear about that.
This is, for example, a very strange but question for which there will be positive as well as negative evidence.
Yeah, that's quite interesting because, like, in a way, these are kind of axioms, and now they won't be. Like, I mean, they'll be non-axiomatic. That's crazy.
Right. The system will reason about the structures like about any other things. So it will overcome its own syntactic as well as reasoning rules limit.
Blowing my mind, yeah.
And this is the power of term logics. This is always what that there can't be, how should I say? There's really a lot of potential in term logics, and I really think that this property alone, to use a term logic, is probably one of the most ingenious things about this system in general, because I can, for example, say that if I eat ice, that eating let's generalize this, that ice eating is good. This is so easily expressible with term logic, at least with Bayes term logic, where I wouldn't even know how to nicely express this in predicate logic, for example. I mean, I could say, because it really talks about the relation. This, for example, is easy self ice, but it's not usually in first order logic, for example, you are not allowed to talk about the relation itself to say this sort of thing, because here this relational term is, or this predicate is itself an argument of another predicate. This is not allowed in predicate logic.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the strength of term logic, that you can recursively build up structures and still they make sense. uh, oops. So that the self that uh, that eating ice is good is a bad example, and and Tony thinks Tony thinks that myself eating ice is that that it's good that, oh, how should I even say this? Tony thinks that it's a bad
It's a bad example.
example that myself eating ice is good. To some extent, this is already very complicated, but it shows the flexibility of the inheritance relation.
Is it Lisp?
But this is normal NAR.
That was joke, sorry.
Oh, probably I should read it without those. And probably I should use. For some reason, I still use the old syntax. It's
Well,
always
until you start writing it regularly, I guess, yeah, we're gonna do that. I still use mine when I'm doing it as well, which is different to yours. So we'll get out of the habit once we start using the other one, the closure version.
There's some value in like having the arrows. Like sometimes it's nice to be able to differentiate between all the parentheses.
Yeah, well, the arrows are the self-contained statements. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, it's very expressive. There's a good example in the book that Pei wrote about this, which is quite informative to me, and it's basically it's the example that says Mary believes that John thinks that the world is round, and there's so much information in that it's someone's belief about someone else's mental state about a certain thing. So the fact that you can actually capture the theory of mind in such a small space, I think is extremely powerful. So you can capture thoughts about other people's thoughts incredibly concisely, which I think is a really important thing when you're starting to think about education and working in communities with other machines, other people, etc. So it's extremely powerful representation.
Yeah, for sure.
But I know you guys haven't really got into writing any narcisse yet, and
Well,
I'm no.
yeah, I haven't. I've been doing those. In the background, I've been doing like some of those examples that it's been going around with that university course that's happening. But
Oh yeah,
I haven't had much time for it yet. But
yeah.
yeah.
And I'm not particularly fluent in Narcisse. I mean, Patrick's significantly more fluent, but once you start using it regularly, it will start to come again. I haven't done anything in it for ages, and I'm extremely rusty now. But I was never as fluent as Patrick. But once you start using it, you'll start to see how to form, how to put problems down into the right format and things. So it is like learning a language in a way, but it's simpler than a foreign language because the concepts are much easier to understand.
Sometimes I see that certain English sentences, are more concisely readable in Narcisse. This is very strange. Sometimes I really prefer such a representation.
Yeah, it's clear what it means. Yeah. There is a language actually that was written. You may have come across it. Lojban. Have you heard of it? Which
Oh
is
no?
it's an unambiguous language that was designed for communication with machines. Yeah, if you do a search online, just double check the spelling. It's a while since I looked it up. Yeah, Lojban, Lojban, and it's basically an unambiguous language designed for communication between machines. So maybe at some point we should teach NARS how to speak it.
Yeah, why not?
Sounds interesting. And yes, to come back to the bridge rules, I really, for me, the inheritance relation is really the central thing, and it gives, it's really all structures the system should is able to reason to should really be able to be reflected in such a way, because then although we might not have direct use cases at first look, it's giving the system a lot more power. For example, if we think about a simple concept like being fast, probably this concept was built by temporal inference, and still it's very abstract, and we use it to describe all sorts of things which have this property being fast, and it's not a property in classic, not a property in null sense. It's being fast is a concept which is entangled with temporal aspects and so on. I couldn't even write down a definition of being fast. I would no chance. I wouldn't be able to capture this concept. I know that it's somehow a mixture between temporal and spatial observations and generalizing this, but I would not be able to. For cat, I could be a bit more specific, like saying yes, it is meowing and it has this furry, for example, and then I could decompose this one. This one is already not an L property, but nothing which will enter the system at sensory level, but something which is a composition of different events. So this one is like now we have our reflection of implication, but now I will use the implication with after. So this one is basically and we want such a thing. We want the system to reason about this, to decompose it this way, and to build and to use it in intentional composition, like it uses all other terms in extensional composition, leading to terms like a thing which incorporates a part of a temporal observation.
That's crazy.
But this is how the interesting concepts are really built. And this is this is what meowing really is. No one will enter the robot. This was a meowing directly as necessity. It will observe a certain pattern. I just called it. Let's call it frag 1 and frag 2. It will just watch its sound sensor, and for example, this itself would be 500 Hertz active, and this would be, so this is the sound frequency, and this would be another frequency which is typically hearable in meowing sounds. And so this would
Patrick, can you keep going and can you show me what active would also be like?
what?
Like, I want to see the representation of active as well. Within those two frequencies.
Of what?
Nothing. I'm just joking and I'm tired.
No,
No,
I didn't understand the word. Sorry.
It out, so he ground down all the terms.
Oh, that's done. Can't go any further.
Sorry, I didn't understand. You meant the definition of this term?
Yeah.
And
why not?
and the active property.
Yeah.
This one would come from the sensor.
Go deeper. Okay.
This one would be the sound sensory channel.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the best representation for it. I think you have an instance of it as opposed to the thing being active. So you'd have an instance of frequency 500, which is a frequency 500.
Right, this I meant, sorry. Of course. So this one, oh no, here also of course. So
what you'd have instant sound 1 is an inheritance of frequency 500.
Right. And this one I just called active or on, or how you want to call it.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah.
So just sensory property. And from this it would just do certain observations like this one. This one it would reflect. Oh, the dim viewer window is this one. Reflect. And then it would, for example, if it this is what my RAM. It said that my memory is full.
So is
Right.
mine.
I mean, the computer memory.
Yeah, yours is supposed to be full.
But my point is, we want this temporal relations to be reflected in such a way that they can seamlessly integrate into reasoning about inheritance. And
Yeah,
so
that's really
so,
cool.
so the thing which Bai really meant by this is often more like if we only have this one so far. If he read this, he probably more means this.
Right.
And right. And this is, for me, this was always the big question mark. How, if we don't allow this bridge, we don't really allow such a concept to be formed. There are properties, even of simple sounds like meowing, which can only be obtained with a bit of temporal inference. And I wouldn't even know how to define fast, the concept fast, but all I know, it's surely using temporal inference since it's about the speed.
Yeah, I personally think most of these things are grounded in perception motor actions. So fast is actually when you experience things that are moving quickly and people use the word fast, you relate the word fast to the rapidly moving perceptions that you experience. You build up
Mm-hmm.
a category of fast motor actions stroke perceptions, and that's the idea of fastness. The exact it's going to vary in every single person, of course, but I'm pretty sure that most of these adjective type descriptions are all built on perception motor interactions, in conjunction with obviously with language, because you can't form a concept of fast without having a word fast. um,
Mm-hmm.
Many thoughts can't exist unless you actually have the language to support them. So I think language is also very important here. Like the idea of meowing, I think your example is a good one, but then that would actually be linked to the word meowing. So what meowing as a word meant would be that sequence, that temporal sequence.
I'm not so sure. To some extent, that we hear someone speaking, it captures our attention. Probably because it's unanticipated. Probably because it's relevant for different cores. So I think if someone is using a word in a specific context, it's at least the word at least gives us an important anchor to know, okay, there was something which was important enough to give a name to. And so to some extent we learn that words really correspond to things, and but but I don't think that in order to build a concept of meowing that we need a word of it. I think it's more
No,
like here
you're
that
right.
we.
No, I agree. No, you don't have to have a language to have. Obviously, cats understand meowing, but they don't necessarily have a language as such. I think there is a difference at some point, because clearly people think in language. We don't think in primitive concepts. Well, I certainly
Mm-hmm.
don't. I'm assuming other people are the same. So when you're thinking, you are thinking in terms of words, um, and
Hmm.
and and that's because they're extremely powerful. But I think they're also a higher level of abstraction on top of the belief hierarchy. And below, lower down, then yeah, there's definitely concepts that exist without words. But as you go higher up, you start to have language representations of the concepts.
Mm-hmm. I agree, but I'm not sure if the language is. I mean, to some extent, it's a good motto to like, how should I say, to put the dots into the right direction. But for example, currently I'm speaking without imagining the words before I speak. I just do it, and I have no idea why this works. It's
Oh no, but that's because you don't consciously believe you know what you're going to say next. But clearly you had enough practice in the past to create sequences of semantically meaningful words into sentences, and your brain knows that. It's practiced it for tens of thousands of hours, so it's very good at it, and you can do it subconsciously, so you don't even need to think about it necessarily.
Yes, I think it's at least a guide which can which guides our doubts, because how should I say
Well,
this?
I regard it as a form of compression. So, for example, i.e., language. So, for example, this temporal sequence we have here, if you had to think with that all the time, it would really slow your thinking down. If instead of having to say, ampersand, squiggly thing, frequency 500 active, frequency 700 active, implication after, instead of saying that, you could just say meow. It really speeds up your ability to think. And I think that's part of what language does. It abstracts complex concepts into simple representations, then you can manipulate far more effectively than the concepts that they represent.
To some extent, I agree, but to some extent also not, because for example, if we look at NL reasoning rules, they don't look at all the parts. They only look at a certain structure. For example, if we would have this thing, let's here put such a
So,
thing.
I mean, you're thinking of it in terms of just the patterns that it
Right.
represents. Yeah.
So it would still derive this from this provided evidence without looking at the parts. It would just, in the inference rule, would just see this as.
Yeah, in that case, I agree. It can ignore the complexity because it's not using it. But if it wants to reason about the meowing, then it does need to use it.
This is true. And to some extent, it's also related to the abbreviate operator.
Yeah.
That,
I agree. I actually think that really is actually all that language does. The abbreviate operator provides a word for a concept. In our case, it provides a shortened identifier for it, which is in the system. It's actually a word that means that thing.
The cat is
So in
T1.
this case, T1 equals whatever that sentence was. It means a cat meowing or whatever. Yeah.
So it creates own words. And this I meant to some extent with abbreviate NL alone has a lot of the flexibility which we observe in our own language without having to stretch the boundaries of syntax.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean. All right. So in this particular case, I would regard it's actually going to be creating its own language, really, isn't it? By abbreviating the concepts that he wants to abbreviate into shorter forms.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. It would be interesting to actually see how that actually maps to natural language, natural, say, English language, for example. Although, actually, it would be interesting, wouldn't it? Because the language that Nell uses here, the abbreviations, and it could actually abbreviate statements or properties or instances or whatever, anything that it was of a certain complexity. So it can abbreviate concepts, nouns, adjectives, whatever it is, really. So it would be a language as such, but it would be completely a national in a sense. It wouldn't have any nationality other than its own. In fact, nothing else would be able to understand it except itself.
This is true, and this I also see as the reason why. I would not say that I'm sure about this, but I think when it comes to letting multiple NAR instances communicate with each other, then I don't think that NEL is better than our language. I think for two NAR systems, it might be better to use a flexible language like English than using mathematical terms which have different interpretations in the different systems.
Yeah. They're very subjective, aren't they? And also the time of the system, the speed of a system makes such a huge difference whether something is a sequence or a concurrent. If it's a very fast system, things will be sequences much more frequently than they would be in a slow system where they would be concurrent.
And the concepts would not be very compatible between those two systems because they're built on different building blocks.
Exactly. Yes. And I tried to have this discussion with Pei a while back about subjective time, but I didn't really seem to get my point across. But it was the issue that I was trying to explain.
Especially this thing. This might not even exist in the second system. It might not even have an audio channel.
Right.
So this grounding, which corresponds to the concept cat in this system, is very useless to the other system. While when they built the convention to use a certain word like cat, assuming that they both have whatever way to recognize this word, will give them a common grounding of meaning. Namely,
there's got to be enough commonality in the properties and instances that cat represents for two systems for it to have enough overlap for it to be meaningful. Even though they could be very different sets, there must be a big enough intersection of the two sets for cat to exist. Yeah.
Right. And this word then is a better base than something which might not even exist in the other system.
Yeah. So it's basically it's summary of the concept, isn't it? The summary of the concept cat is actually the word cat, and it represents the intersection of two different entities' beliefs about something. So okay.
Right.
That's actually like, I mean, imagine if you had two humans and like, okay, so one's blind and one is I don't know, unable to feel or something, and then how would they, and like that's their only two senses, then how would they then come to an agreement of the same object? Like,
this is a good question.
Sounds like this.
Right.
I mean, the only thing you'd have in common would be smell and taste and sound.
Right.
But there's still all those properties. So there'd still be a whole range of properties.
I wasn't clear, but like, I mean, like just one had eyes and one had only a sense of touch, and that's it. And
right.
Then, like,
there is no properties in common, so therefore you can't come to an agreement.
I would not say so. The great thing about I would say about the inheritance relation in general is to to be able to let the system find analogies between things, although they are different in nature, just because they share. For example, if we look at the pattern, that let's say the person only can use her hand to touch the letter, and the structure, the structural information about that letter which comes into his brain is to some extent encoding the same thing as the structural information which comes into the head of the other person through its visual system. There are structural similarities which can be captured by different sensors, although they use different methods to capture the similarities.
I see what you're saying. So like you might like have a curvature in your hand that goes around like a ball, and then the eye could also see the curvature of the ball as well, and then that would be the similarity. You could also verify that you're both sensing the same object at the same time just by using temporal timing patterns as well, maybe.
There would definitely be an agreement on, although one only has touch and one person only visual, only eyes, then they would still have a agreement on the essence of what a round object is. Although they base this idea on entirely different elementary statements, elementary encodings, or however you want to call it. This I'm very confident about, and I think this is one of the big strengths of intelligent systems, to observe things as same, although they are represented differently.
Well, on that note, I'm gonna jump off the call. But yeah, thanks so much, guys. It's always a pleasure, and have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Have a good
good
night.
night.